So cold, so sweet, so bad. Let her go, God bless her. No matter where she may be, she can serve
A quick
this
sound
wide
test.
world over. Oh, but she never found a sweet man like me. When I die, I want you to bury me straight legs, a box back coat, and a studs in Hare. Put a $20 gold piece on my watch chain. Let all the boys know I died standing.
Okay, guys, that should correct it now. Let's hope I corrected it. Alright. Alright. There should be no sound, Magger. Let's see. I apologize for that, because there will be delays because I'm using a variety of things. Oh, there we go. So let's start this from the beginning for all y'all that's not new to this. This is Zero End's channel. So let's kick it off. Today, chapter and conclusion of this very much a welcome and wonderful, spectacular, and informative book laid out and left by us by two elders, Nathan and Julius Hare, both PhDs, one in education, one in PhD. I don't know what her degree is, but I think Nathan Hare has PhD and Julian Harris have ED, so I guess she has a PhD in education. So now, as you know, now that we are at the conclusion of this book, I'm not sure if I'm going to do announcements on Zero End's channel here, but there will be maybe another book reading of a live stream, maybe, or I might do uploads. I'm not sure what I'm about to take this channel, but as you know, I haven't really done much lately. But nonetheless, you know, I will figure it out as I come along. But I respect those that have either watched this video, liked this video, and catch all the previous episodes for the past end of year, of last year, even onto this year. And as you know, this book itself has roughly, how many pages this book had? 187 pages with reference. So this is a very much a well good read book. And for those that want to get for themselves to have in their library, I advise you should. There's some good information on here. I think the book right now is probably less than $10. Now if you can get it cheaper. But you know, what I know. As I'm looking through, I'm probably gonna give you some video images in a little bit. Hold on a second, people, man. Hold on. Okay, guys, I'm back. I'm back. So I'm not gonna hold y'all time. So let's go into the information at hand. This is chapter 12, titled Second and Last Chance. The conclusion. The things have fallen so sadly that a counselor at Stad and Caution, historically reactionary Howard University, Andrew B. Chapman, was implied to call a conference recently on a campus threatening to bold and unshame subjects of man sharing. This top report of a sweetheart swindled in the district wherein covered in black males will take up with black, white, collar, and professional women, extracting a lot of cash, then disappearing. After a couple of weeks or so, the Howard therapist called a press conference and explained that so many women had been in counseling for depression and subsequently to the demeaning prospects of finding a serious relationship with a man. Now, mind you, this is back in the late 80s. And we know now, with the period of a lot of black women now, that they have a lot of psychological issues. Some suffer from depression, drugs, and it's bad. I'd say right now, it's real bad. You get me? Oh. I don't want that. So, lots has changed in the past, I would say, years or decades since the written of this book. So, as you know, and as you really know, that nothing has really changed in the last, when this book came out, 1984, in the last 37 years. But let's go on. The therapist encouraged black women to begin to adopt an a la carte approach in their search for a man. In the a la carte approach, a woman dates several men for what they call specific reasons or to fulfill, however, needs happen to predominate at the moment. This romantic altruism is instant gratification, as its nadir promise splittering rewards at best. Indeed, one of the reasons black males find it hard these days to help or to keep their commitment to any one woman is what we call super availability of the rest of them. A recent issue of Essence magazine has an article by a Howard University professor of psychiatrics celebrating the joys of masturbation. Listen good to this. Masturbation, a way and experience your sexual self. The article includes such a blemishment of autosexuality, do it yourself, as using the saliva or spit at a lubricant and the celebration of the potential more abrasive vibrator, which the Howard psychiatrics caution is safer at low speed. Now, has anybody ever did research when black women start using sex toys? I want to hear this, because this book was released back in the 80s. So you tell me back in the 80s, sisters were fucking with toys? Really? They were not riding the cock carousel like we expect back in the 80s, but people like and professors of Howard telling mostly black women, because Howard back in the 80s, and it's changed now, it was mostly predominantly black university. Last time I checked. And to find that this psychiatrist is telling the few people that come to his doors to engage in masturbation is very much questionable. All right. So let me pause here for a second, guys. I'll be right back. All right, I am back for a little break. Had to handle that. Okay, let's look at this. Oh. Hmm. Okay. Okay, I'm back, people. So let's continue. Um, let's take a look here. Where am I? Oh yes. Oh yes. Hold on. You know, reading the last chapter, I know it's not gonna be easy, but you know, it comes with a territory to be dedicated. If you ever know that, this takes a lot of work. And I hold no bars over this. Sorry. Okay. The situation is now so grave that there is a denial in the June of 1983 issue of Miss Magazines that feminism destroyed the family or helped to as part of the Nixon Rockefeller Unisexualization program. or that a feminism is anti-family through everybody or anybody objective enough to look can easily see that the movement generally promotes the notion that a man should not be regarded as important to as a woman, and that motherhood is without much renewing values and may be oppressive, if not a curse. Oppressive, if not a curse. Values may be oppressive, if not a curse. So I guess they view roles, male and female roles, in regards to family, as oppressive. It's questionable. Okay. And you have to see Barbara enriching the heart of men, America's Dream, and the Flight from Commitment of 1981, and Feminine Notes, Miss May of 1983. Miss Enrich, nevertheless, admits in quoting a study by Stanford University sociologist Leonard J. Weitzman that, and this is what a person quotes: upon divorce, a woman's standards of living falls on the average by 73% the first year, while the standard of living of her ex-husband rise by 41%. For the man, the alternate to marriage might be loneliness and TV dinners for women. It is all too often poverty. If a man remains single until he is 28 or even 38, he may be criticized by girlfriends for his fear of commitment, but he will no longer be suspect of an unhealthy attachment to his mother or a latent tendency to you know what. If he divorced his middle-aged wife for some sweet young thing, he may be viewed not as a traitor to the American way, but as a man who has a demonstrated capacity for growth. Her complaint is real enough, but precisely a byproduct of what they call pest liberation or puberto liberation of the Nixon-Rockefeller program of unisexualization. This is doubtly so for the black woman who thought white-run woman, or what they call white-run wife house, and white-run wife abuse centers and the likes. It's encouraged by white feminists armed with grants, centers, and resources to identify her problems on a personal level. With the black mate with sexism in the job market manipulating by white people. In addition, the black woman complaints against the black male too frequently displacement of his rage unto her, together with acting out behaviors, is co-op to legitimize the white woman's guess for more of the limited reform apple pie to place him or place with her name shared in the white family pot, while our men are further denied and what it called destinated. A study of 4,000 men and women in the United States conducted by Penn State professor Gerald Phillips conclude that only a small portion of women, if any, what they call benefits from the feminist movement, the better trained, better educated, upper middle class woman. This duplicates our own early findings as well as our 1969 predictions. Interesting. Professor Phillips might also have added, since black women have always had to work in order to help make ends meet, if not to go it alone, and whenever new occupations gained they received in the feminist 70s have left them too often with an inadequate supply of what they call equal status males. However, A benefit to conformist scholars, Professor Phillips went on a predicted optimistically that computers will erase much of the current difference between men and female in a muscle-dominant society. No more professors than to typewriters did in the days, unless computers will begin to give birth to human offspring, in which can heavenly may need to help us all. By the year 2000, 100% of those living below poverty level in the United States is projected to be women. This is called the feminization of poverty by feminist theoretical who, as a care group of the Nixon Rockefeller program of unisexualization, helps to bring about the destruction of marriage and the family and the proliferation of single women parents, now in the wings of the so-called feminization of poverty. It is a direct consequence of the so-called choice to be single they were holding out in the 70s. Yet almost all of the members of single mothers by choice, for instance, who were interviewed recently, said they had not given up hope that they would someday be married. Let's go back. Do a quick pause. Have y'all noticed they talk about computerization and how typewriters replace certain things, and now machines and computers have the capability to give birth to people? Yet this is something that Nathan and Julius Harris sought out, thought about, and put in the book and predict what is to come in the coming decades, where it stands for not only black people but for human beings in the Western world. It's gonna be a point with education, and I'm gonna give you a little glimpse, and maybe in the future, maybe on the other channel from Chaos Reign, there's something that has to be examined about artificial intelligence and the possibility of replacing teachers, which that's not really much talked about. And the reason why it's not talked about because people think that machine learning is not a possibility, and there's no way in hell that a machine is gonna do everything that a human could possibly do. But they don't know how far beyond we are with technology, and we have come a long way for the last 38, 37 years since the written of this book. I hear glimpses and rumors of artificial intelligence in regards to school, that it's gonna be a point that most of these teachers that still teach, they're gonna be relevant for maybe another 10 years at most. I give it maybe another 15 years, and eventually AI might get to the point where it might replace teachers. This is not Zero Ends talking about. This is what is already possibly going to happen. So keep that in mind. And that's just a prediction. Oh, and another thing. In regards to women hoping that they say they're single by choice, that's a lie. You're single by choice because you're hoping that some man that is going to be that you are sexually attracted to will meet pretty much your perfect criteria, your perfect list. So that way you hope that he marries you and everything goes well. That's delusion. That's serious delusion. And we already know now, since the past 30-something years, from where it was like 1 and 2, 1 and 1, now it's now 1 and 4 women, especially sisters, it's going to get married in their lifetime. And they already predict the next 5 or 6 years down the line, it's going to be 1 and 5. So this so-called notion that you're single by choice is a myth. You're single by choice because you're hoping to get a better deal. Matter of fact, the dude that you are having sex with right now, you feel you could do better, and you hope that you might do better to get a better deal. But we already know from the data, and we already look at the environment we're in now, that's not the case. Especially women that's getting old and you have no kids. You're putting yourself much more far behind the dating scene. But let's go on. That's not me. That's not the purpose. But let's go on with the reading. The feminist element of the federal government program of unisexualization is now revealed at best possible liberation. Barbara L. Rich, author of The Heart of Men, goes so far as to maintain that the feminist movement was a reaction to a major cop-out by men in their own early revolt against the traditional masculine roles as the family breadwinner. Mr. or Mrs. Enrich is getting hot, but we now know that things are not quite that simple. However, she correctly observes that women got stuck with the lower paying jobs as well as with all the old responsibilities that men are increasingly able to duck. Communist Juan Beck continues the argument, and this is what Juan said. Who really did win? Women who are now stuck with doing 2 jobs instead of 1 and are paid only 59 cents to a man of $1. Women who, in increasing numbers, must take sole financial and caretaking responsibilities for children. Women who are now socially pressured into loveness, premature sex with increased risk of herpes and abortion. And that's by Juan. Enrich and Evans both point their fingers at the soaring divorce rate, which pushes millions of women onto poverty and welfare. The what they call do your own thing approach of the so-called sexual liberation movement at bottom aims at discouraging marriage and thus population growth, leaving men single and women single mothers. Thus, happily married Betty Fraudrin has now moved on to the second stage, in which to seek the liberate man and to claims the complaint of women now that the damage is done, and many believe irrelevantly. Now that women are having second thoughts, now that our families and our relationships are in disarray, now that the government has a population control program working, now that the baby boom generation has reached adulthood and are going to need customers in the future, and that they are big enough base population of working persons to support the senior baby boomers in old age. The manipulators are encouraging women who were once lured into the job market to take out time now before it's too late to have a child. True, this will ease the unemployment problem, other things equal, but above all, the women choose to stop working or to stop work and have children, thus who have their privilege will be disproportionately white and middle class, thereby implementing in parts the second stage of Nixon Rockefeller population control program of unisexualization, offsetting the warning relative white population of Americans and the world white feminists who openly condemn motherhood and family roles, echoing and Nixon Rockefeller commissions will now begin to see it as a strategy to pretend they have not been destroyed of the family nor hostile to homemaking or homemakers, but we know that they have been. The U.S. News and World Reports predict that in the year 2033, relationships will be a confusing tangle as a result of people living longer and changing mates to suit the seasons of their lives. The editor goes on to predict that the growing trends of serial marriage will be a norm and plan for parts of adulthood, and that the government will become more involved than ever before and will also oversee the use of genetic engineering techniques that hold the potential for altering characteristics of babies. Do you believe they will blacken characteristics? Further, U.S. News and World Reports forensics, and it states, it may even fall to Uncle Sam to help increase falling birth rates. Some futuristic foreseeing the days when the government will not only offer financial rewards for newborns, but also encourage more births through greater use of test tube babies techniques and surrogate mothers. We are already here, people. Unfortunately, we are at that times now. This is 2021. So in the next decade, and actually the next 12 years, or maybe shorter, that's going to be the norm and reality. So what was predicted back in the 80s is showing fruit now. Although this sounds like science fiction, it really is not, usually for one institution, such as the family, to give up some of its functions to another, such as governmental. Explained in Temple University Demographics, Joseph McFalls. Little by little, they're letting the cat out of the bag, but cats and bags nevertheless continue to escape the black intelligentsia. Meanwhile, feminists include a lesbian center, for instance, in Oakland, California, are storing up their own sperm banks, blood banks styles. Although friendly heterosexual male sperms are accepted and lesbians are posed to secede from heterosexual and to use gay sperm only thus before we know it. They will have the sperm and gone as it were. Indeed, Rabbi, Arama Feinberg, in the book Sex and the Pulpit, Sodomy, ponders in the entire chapter whether the penis is expendable. Sodomy, actually. That's deep. That's real deep. A lesbian woman who helps impregnate her former wife through a do-it-yourself artificial insemination process involves a turkey baster, has recently taken her lover to court over visitations rights, belitling any father. She points out her doubtful payment of regular child support since the breakup of her marriage last spring. Two San Francisco sociologists claim that their 2-year study indicate that the practice of incest is not harmful psychologically and may be beneficial in your health. In a paper, The Final Taboo, Believers or Deliverers, to a sociological convention in Los Angeles, the incense sociologist was defined by the New York Times columnist Anthony Lewis, Washington Post columnist Mary McGregory, Brian Gamble of the Today Show, and Carl T. Rowan, syndicate columnist, as well as Tom Brokaw, Evan Walter Mondale on the This Week with David Berklin, and Senator Robert Dole, Arkansas of Meet the Press, saw fit that hedge on the issue when Ronald Reagan shoots from the hip, spoke out against it. He received so much flank that White House Chief of Staff James Baker in a rare press conference said that the president obviously misspoke and that he meant that it is not the pragmatist thing to do, or pragmaticus thing to do. Medical experts also revisit their previous position to say now that pregnancy after 35 may not carry a high risk of birth defects as they previously claimed. Additionally, thousands of men and women are now encouraged to seek reversal major surgeries that take up the 3 hours on the operation table for past vasectomies and tubal liquidation. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ligation. The corrective surgeries cost from $4,000 to roughly $8,000 and is not covered by health insurance, leaving out most of you know who, but contrast abortion, even where there is an health risk or disease of childbirth, is covered by Medicare. Medicare receipts of courses will not be able to afford the reverse tubal ligation of the unsexual movement what they call diabolical racist means and decrease the non-poor or non-white poor actually birth while endeavoring to increase the birth among affluent and infertile whites. South African openly and officially present these two concussions policies of suppressing black births while encouraging white births. But the United States and the World Banks, led by liberal moderators, accomplished the same things in more deceptive and subtle ways, subtle ways actually. In addition to the test tube babies and 20,000 surrogate mothers, they come up with something called adoptive pregnancy. The way the techniques working is to transfer the ovum and mature female egg cells from woman donor to the so-called mother. The egg is fertilized in one woman and transferred to implant in the womb of another. And let us call it the surrogate womb. By any name, rent a womb, babies, or whatever, it's going to great lengths in a world supposedly wavering under overpopulation. Actually, more than 2/3 of the world population occupies less than 1/10 of the 1/3 of the earth that is not water. Nevertheless, the techniques of adopting pregnancy is fast becoming routine in the cattle breeding. Among the many scientists published the technique of adopting pregnancy of or for humans in Dr. Ngugi Mastromonian Jr., chairman of the obstetric and gynecology at the University of Pennsylvania, who added that many women would nevertheless insist on becoming pregnant with their own egg cells and are their husband's sperm, that is, to have their own baby without actually having it or carrying and giving birth to the baby. Scary. Today, 1/5 of all babies were delivered by a cesarean C-section. That's what it's called. C-section, actually. A very dangerous surgical procedure, once restricting to emergency situations, but has increased threefold in the past 15 years, since the Nixon Rockefeller Commissions launched their program of population control. Surgery is now the major form of birth control, yet at a black nationalist meeting in Los Angeles last February, a black man in the back of the audience demanded confirmation for the notion that African males are the most brutal in the world, considered that what they call clitoral or the clitorinus. It was pointed out to him that nobody cuts as well as the white male, especially when he is a surgeon, and that it is matter of value judgment. Whose cutting you prefer? A London Observer reports revealed how Christianity continues to clash with African customs. For instance, ground their own concept of surrogate motherhood, whereas women-to-women marriage have been practiced for generations. Casa tribal men defend the customs not only for inheritance purpose, but when the man's wife is infertile, but also becomes tribal, law making no provision for adopting of children. Attorney Don Buckworth, a Kasi lawyer, believes that their practice is a more civil kind of adoptive than the Western type of adoption by buying children. Christianity, once again, is now being used in Africa as a means of cultural disruption and mind control for population and sexual control of Europeanization. Let's pause right here for a second and go back to what I was reading earlier about the C-section, Carcinian section. Did y'all know that here in the West, that they do more surgeries in regards to giving birth to children. Mostly it's done on non-white people, black people, people of color, brown people too. And did you know if you have a carcinoid section more than 2 to 3 times, they will tell you that you cannot give birth again after the 3rd time you cut. How I know? Because I know a few women I sometimes talk to that had that surgery, much less 2, and they said that you cannot have birth no more. So when you get a C-section as a woman, they are actually performing a voluntary sterilization on you. Keep that in mind. Every time you go to the knife and they have to cut your baby out, you're one step closer of being automatically sterile, because they're going to give you threats and tell you, say, if you have give birth again, most likely it's going to happen to you. Just saying. So if you ladies, if you're not giving birth naturally and you want more than 2 kids, you better start find other methods of giving birth instead of just lying on the bed how the Westerns do it to give birth. It's a kind of backwards type of thinking. And yes, Christianity is a weapon, a tool to control the minds first and then your sexuality second. So most black people, 80% are Christians. So if they're using it in Africa, they definitely control the minds of the African people in Africa. Let's go on. In the United States, while there has been hardly any concern paid by black intellectuals to the merge of population control and genetic engineer, white clergy's men have spoken out for their own reason about the hazards for the future of the human race, alleging that the genetic debate cannot be suppressed any longer. Columnist Richard Reeves in the Kansas City Times of July 4th, 1983, reports that the president of the National Council of Churches was among those who are asking scientists not to conduct experiments leading to possible alteration of human heredities. Remember how the U.S. Public Health Service deliberately let black men with syphilis go untreated in Tuskegee experiments, Alabama experiments from 1932 to 1972, roughly 30 years. When an Associated Press reports broke the hidden 40-year story. Also, Professor J. Robert Nelson of Boston University, a quote in the June 20, 1983 issue of Newsweek on the new possibilities of modifying human life. We are in danger of threatening human beings as animals, or treating human beings as animal stock. The professor complains concern over the unsatisfactory administration response to their complaints prompted clergymen last summer to pressure Congress to stop human engineering, according to Richard N. Osling and Michael P. Harris, writer of the newspaper. And this is what is writing in quote. Check how long this is. The clergy main concern is the ethical justification for making changes in the germline or sex cells, which regulates the transmission of inheritable traits. Scientists as now working to change the genes in these cells that create such inherent maladies as Tay-Sachs disease and sickle cell anemia. The healthy traits would be passed on indefinitely to succeed generations. However, ideals that goals might seem singered on the petition to Congress feared that the engineering change would later cause unforeseen problems. One explains, eradication of sickle cell anemia genes might make an individual more susceptible to malaria. Others, clergymen, are deeply concerned that scientists, despite their disclaimers, will eventually seek to make more changes in short to usurp the creative functions of God or nature by building a kind of superman. Singer of the declaration include leaders of the Lutheran churches in America, the Episcopalian Church and the United Church of Christ, the United Methodist Church, and the Southern Baptist Convention, 23 Catholic bishops, 2 Jewish leaders, and the head of the National Council of Churches. Indeed, they were joined by 7 scientists, including Nobel laureates, concerned that when it comes to altering human genes, who is going to set those specifications? You know as well as we do who will not decide them. You must also understand that the final push in the biotechnological industries grew pragmatically out of the recommendation for research financing issues by Nixon, Rockefeller commissions, although various individuals had randomly and informally been so engaged for years just to astronomers' interest in the moon proceedings. The U.S. government programmatically decisions in the early 1960s to get to the moon inside of 10 years. However, the resistance of the biotechnologists to a call by religious leaders to erect ethical reviews commissions to monitor research into human genetics engineering and stummed up David Padua, chairman and chief executive office of agrigenetics, Baltford, Colorado. Padua defends the scientist's stance of eugenically in a world of crime, drugs, war, and hunger. I find it a bit hard to take the self-appointed censor of developmental biology. Those readers familiar with the rating of eugenicists, or what they call eugenicists, from 19th century, Malthusianism, down to today's will recognition of Padua, almost verbatim Maleficisium. I think that's how it's pronounced. Sorry, guys, I'm getting tongue-tied on that. Maleficisium. Among those seeing population control as second only to the problem or possibility of unclear war, see our intro deduction for others. And Dr. Carl Dagini, the chemist professor who developed the birth control pill and reached in Stanford University, feminist studies programs, in his new book, The Political of Contemporarism, Birth Control in the Year 2001, Dr. Dagini, who owned a 1,000-acre cattle, has a Santa Cruz Mountain, and a president of Zucom Corporation, which is developed a hormonal approach to instinct control, promotes the prominent importance of population control, except for prevention of an unclear Holocaust, achieving effective human fertility control during the balance of the century will be the overriding social section, affirming to qualities of life of the planet for decades. Writers last summer in the National Syndicate column and echoing Dr. Dagini of the federal official support the Nixon Rockefeller Commission's James Kilpatrick seems two great dangers. One talking about unclear wars, others rarely making headlines, and the continued explosion of population in the less developed countries, or actually developed nations. Kilpatrick goes on to reveal the racism behind the official government policies of white liberal hypes. Quote, the Population Reference Bureau reports, which held that, and this is what it says in the following, in my voice. And it says, the less developed countries, which accounts for 75% of the world population, are growing at just over 2% annually, compared to 0.6% for the more developed countries. These uneven rates made that the less developed countries will constitute 79% of the world by the year 2000 and 3% by 2020, which, if we're on track, we're now in 2021. So it looks like he could be on track to what he predicted. Moving on. Although Kilpatrick threw up the usual smokescreen about starvation and the overall monotheism line, while never voicing the need for a better distribution of the abundant resource, food, and wealth, or a concessions to the plunder of the earth for profit and power. He concluded that my only thought is that our white children and grandchildren will constitute an even shrinking minorities in the years ahead. For their sakes, if for no other, we ought to study the population projections and think about the future now. The new to culprits is that they have already been not only studying but manipulating these trends at least since 1969. As the majority program of the United States government and the World Bank's is work all the better, of course, if they can keep most people from realizing what they are doing, even feeling the program, as they pick up the tents in the winds of public opinion and conventional wisdom is a matter of choice, or as worse, confirmation to invoke changing fashions or a program for liberation. Meanwhile, geneticists are crawling out of the woodwork in droves. A New York Times report was reprinted all around the country claiming that numbers of babies born with some physical or mental defect had doubled over the past 25 years. The geneticists are predicting seriously and disturbing social and economic effects when in fact many of these birth defects are a product of the social economic discrepancy in access to diet, medical care, maternal and child care, and the quality of life and environment. See, and we're going to pause right there. This is one of the few reasons. If there's birth defects, mental disorders, where that's doubling every 25 years, that's done by the environment and controlled by the food source. And as y'all know, the food has been tampered with back in the 80s, where there was not much processed food and high corn or sugar process in certain foods up to the 80s. So you do the math and you double that with now the tampering of food. You create more and more defects. And that's not by coincidence, that's all by design. Got it? But let's go on. Such scientists as Dr. Peter Botetti, director of University of California, San Francisco Health Policy Programs, and Dr. Mary Grace Kovar, analysis at the National Center for Health Statistics, see social problems occurring from the existing of these mentally handicapped individuals. We are seeing real increase in children with some form of handicap, as this resulting in a substantial burden to society, a burden that will increase with time. Cabinet members Butt and Watts were forced to resign for saying much less than this. The National Health Survey, which determines the new social perils, is a program mandate by Congress. Dr. Barrett programs at the University of California is financed by the United States Public Health Service, the same one that carries on the syphilis experiment on black men in Tuskegee until discovering and exposed in 1972. Reports present to the meeting last spring in Detroit of America advancements of science and told by prospects of an emerging ability on the part of growing and breeders to choose the sex composition of animals and humans with complete certainty with the next 5 or 10 years. Reproductive psychologist Ronald Erosion already claims to be able to, and this is what he quotes and says, dramatically improve the chances of having a boy over a girl by separating sperm according to their abilities to swim through a thick album gel. Sperm carrying the X chromosome are favorable to the productive of boys. The company now has 10 clinics nationwide and 7 other overseas that performs the service and tells its clients that it increased the chances of having a boy from the normal rates of about 50% to between 75 and 80%. This is part of the biomedical research stress by the 1969 Neil Rockefeller population growth and the American future calling for federal funding of $1 billion a year, as known to have allocate hundreds of millions subsequent, although most of their recommendations have been accomplished through propaganda and though control or psychological warfare. Meanwhile, scientists at the University of Pennsylvania Westar Institution are reporting to have produced a genetic copy of a mouse on their way to the possible cloning of human beings. Henceforth, the research has been restricted to frogs, lower animals, but this is the closest they come one step away from cloning of a mammal. Biologist Davar Sotar said, "We did, in fact, produce a mouse by nuclear transplantation, but that is all I can say now. Nuclear transportation is where a living cell nucleus is placed in another cell that has had its nucleus removed." Dr. Salter and James McGrath of Westar Institution reveals that their team had already produced nearly 100 different mice so far using a nucleus transfer procedure. In the same way that nuclear stockpile presents both the hazard of leakage and accidental and precipitous determinants in that what is available for using risk being used, as it correlations of handguns and suicide rates. The development of genetics engineering and biomedical research as orchestrated by the Nixon Rockefeller Commissions raised the peril of misuse, abuse, catastrophes, accidents, and miscalculation. Remember, such scientists' mishaps in the past as babies born deformed as a result of ill-conceived pills and development of rare forms of vaginal cancer in women following exposure of certain medical drugs. And what drugs are those that women are exposed? And then go in detail to that. I want to know what that is. But anyway, moving on. Yet the program of population control, particularly the coming, what they call unisexual means to its now in vogue as a program in which liberal moderators and often conservatives, Democrats and Republican, blacks and whites can seemingly collaborate. Indeed, a number of leading black nationalists, each in their own way, are now seem adopted and assimilating to the new program of white feminism and unisexualization. Some are already openly and advocating, while others are subtle and optimism. They will obtain, for instance, family planning grants, appealing like their white liberal mentors to the need for fairness in regards to black women or some other sanity surface issues such as halting high legitimacy rates among black teenagers. They do not bother this illegitimacy and misroom since the proliferation of birth control technology in large part because such mechanisms took away personal responsibility for the prevention of pregnancy and the management of sexual fidelity and integrity. So I guess when women are given the option to take these, birth control and all the preventive actions so they don't conceive, it does draw the line of, promiscuous behavior, hell, high body counts in women, etc. That's just me adding that. So let's go on. The black nationalist establishment will deliberately find many ways if we don't watch them to collaborate with the white man program of unisexualization at the same time as they continue to harp about white cultural imperialism and colonization of black people's minds now and especially in the early days of African colonization. Yet here present in our own time, indeed, which wholly conforms with the opportunity to resist assimilation and cultural imperialism, they are beginning to find it easier after 15 years of obtain or disdain to assimilate to the program of unisexualization and population control. In other words, genocide. One group in Marxist nationalist groups and the once almost dissolved over a feminist, feminist, lesbian, factionalist, has watered an advocate of agendas of unisexualism, despite their courage, is taking up currently Queen's Mother more two major programs. One, the call for reparations, 4.1 trillion owed by African Americans already by the U.S. government, corporation, and other descendants, heirs of white slave masters and slavery. And two, the demand of the U.S. government ratified the recommendation of a decade-old genocide convention, United Nations Convention on the Prevention of Punishment of Genocide, which would open the ways for black people to bring the U.S. government, as Malcolm X also wished, before world courts and other international institutions for their crimes against black people. However, the U.S. genocidal plan now incorporates a cunning and subtitle rather than merely open killing plans of depopulation depletion by slapping in the back door of family destruction and unisexualization, keeping blacks from being born at their natural pace while gaining control over reproduction through genetic engineering, biomedical research, test tube babies, and the likes of, designed to favor the manipulation of middle-class whites. Yet Queen Mother programs is the furthest thing from the mind of most nationalist leaders today, currently making their pace with apathy, cultural confusion, while fixating on the ego gratification of an accent African past that has gone forever. They will continue to sit at Queen Mother feet in conference halls, but keep their eyes and nose trained on their white mentors, slowly moving the apes and parrot key aspects of the Nixon-Rockefeller program of unisexualization. Thus, despite all butterflies and puffing, black nationalism as a group are being revealed as essential assimilationists beneath the skin. Their nationalism is only skin deep. Black Marxists, for their part, have long been revealed by Harold Cruz and the crisis of the Negro intellect to reflect as essential rationalism of the wishes of integrate, hence, who are left without a current corrupt and carry group to resist the cultural wounds and mechanism of the continuing Europeanization of the world and the cultural or the collateral destruction of the moral and spiritual fibers, indeed, as now emerged, the very biological and human species itself. Very few black intellectuals, include sociologists and demographics, have heard of the Commission of Population Growth and the American Future, although it has shaped our thinking since 1969, even to the point of persuading many that there is no running back now, that nothing can be done to resist the program's unisexualization of the human race and the genocidal manipulation of the racial characteristics of those who will survive. If even black nationalism fails to hold their grounds against the super onslaught of criminal imperialism and psychological warfare, if black intellectual of ever stride so readily deflected from the stalwart course of resistance to the genocidal and destructive programs of unisexualization and population control, we will continue on the road to our graves and perhaps last ideology errors as a people. Brothers and sisters, we are living now in a very special age and era of accumulating knowledge, aim, diminish, wisdom, playing in the last dazzling endings of the clash of the races and culture. We are the inherit of the special rights to revamp the course of history, ensuring the survival of a noble race, if not the human species itself. And that is the end of this book. Let's stop here. And as you know, in the back of the picture, they give a biograph of Nathan Julius Hare. If you ever get the book yourself, they give more background of these two wonderful black people, or black couple. And you know, since I'm wrapping this up, let's go into their little bio. Since you're not familiar with Nathan Julius Hare. Nathan Hare, a clinical psychologist, a private practitioner of San Francisco, holds 2 PH.Ds in psychology and sociology. Editor of Black Male-Female Relationships, he was founded, published of the Black Scholar, and the first coordinator of a Black Studies program in the United States. He coined the term ethnic studies. He also is the author of the Black Anglo-Saxons and many articles. Dr. Harris was co-winner of the 1983 National Award for Distinguishing Scholar Contributions to Black Studies from National Council for Black Studies and recent survey of Black sociologists in America, voting by amongst the 15 leading Black sociologists of all time. Julius Hare holds a what they call MMED from Chicago Roosevelt University. As a teacher in Washington, D.C., she won the Outstanding Educator Awards from the World Book Encyclopedia and the Junior Chamber of Commerce. While at the Golden Gate Broadcast KSFO Radio in San Francisco, she won the National Abraham Lincoln Awards in Broadcasting. Then came 3 years as talk show host at KGO, the local ABC affiliates. She has taught piano, organs of university level, and has done commercial acting. At 17, Julia met Nathan at Oklahoma Langston University, where their courtship proceedings their marriage. Oh, that's beautiful. Lovely. Beautiful. A great book. Very good book. Great book. So, in wrapping up of this lengthy series, it's evident to prevent extinction or the coming destruction of the head of the black race. The black race, as you see, people, is now in America, and possibly outside America, the globe, and the world, we could look at it as an endangered species. And when I mean by endangered species, we're looking at a race right now that possibly could be heading to destruction and possibly a demise, and maybe, if not careful, full extinction. You gotta understand this. Only a race of people could be extinct if they allow other entities and other systems control them. Not environmentally, not social, not in the economic aspect, but if they control what you think. Because your mind follows your actions. And what has done to the black race for centuries, up to the 80s when this book was written, is an examination of how and when and what is to come for black people, men and women, that will have children, and if they're going to maintain black households, black families. And the black family, as we look at today, is in full onslaught and attack. One in 5 or 1 in 4 black women will get married, potentially to a black man, or just get married in general in their life. Marriage right now for black people in the 21st century, as what is data has been shown, is on an all-time low, roughly under 30%. I think it's now touching 26%, and they project it to even go more down. What are the remedies that black people could take now in preventing this demise and eventually the distinction of the ADOS / American descendant of slaves of black men and women in America? The only thing you could do as a black man, black woman, you must take action now and know your purpose now. You must know the onslaught that's taken on you as a black man. If you're not aware of it, you should know now. And you as a black woman, you should understand the onslaught attack on you, because you follow these programs that further divide you and the black man that of your choice, or the black man of the man that you seeking, is full effect. And the many ways they use to destroy the black nation is sex, politics, education, all the 9 areas that Neil Fuller Jr. has been laying out in his own works on the United Independent Code of Race and White Supremacy. That was also finally published more than once, and was finally published again in 1984. So when this book came out, is the same time when Neil Fuller book went through its last publication. So, wrapping this up, there are remedies in preventing this, but it only will involve you as a man and woman to take the action now and do what's necessary to remain and keep the family intact here in the West we call America. Outside America, there's probably a hope for black people that still have families if they're not too completely westernized, which I doubt it, because Western influence is global and it's been global now for decades now. The only thing now is if the blacks outside America get the act together and understand what's happening, they're going to fall to the same victimization that black people in America has suffered for centuries. So I see the future to be gleaming, maybe not hopeless, but there is hope, because in reality, as we look at it, when a nation is trying to rebuild itself or sustain itself, it's not everybody that you expect gets it. You're only going to see a small percentage population get it and take action. The majority population are followers. So that is the message that Zero Ends will leave you here. I recommend you go back to chapters 1 and this chapter here. If you didn't get an understanding of this or the feel of this book, I advise you go back to this on this podcast / YouTube channel, Zero Ends channel. Leave your comments, like the video, and express your thoughts and feelings. And also, the link to the book is also on there too as well. So if you want to get the book and read it for yourself for much more clarity than what I read it, I advise buy the book for yourself and have it in your archives. But that is all I have to say. Thank you again for attending this session. And I'd like to thank the late great Nathan Julius Harris, because your work will never be gone and will never be forever lost, because as long as you have literature, people are always going to go back to your information and what you left to the world. So I thank you again, Miss Julius and Nathan Harris. Thank y'all, and take care.